have a guest lecturer today from HeidelbergCement, Tobias Hartmann. And I know Tobias for some time already. And as I told you, of course, it is a challenge to be a sustainability manager in a big organization, which of course also has some impacts, which we will probably discuss a bit more during your talk. But we have also discussed during this lecture that if you want to make a change, you have to start in the big business, because there is also the potential to actually have positive as well as negative effects. So if we can shape the business in the big companies, we have the potential to actually shape the sustainable development. I think Tobias will tell us a bit about these topics, but also about the CSR activities more in the region. And as I said, let's keep in mind what we have discussed in the lecture so far, especially at the beginning of the lecture, talking about the responsibilities of businesses. And let's have a discussion with Tobias about what it is like and which challenges you face as a sustainability manager in a big company. Thank you so much for being here, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. I think I probably talk about the challenges after the presentation. So this is HeidelbergCement is the best company presentation. No, not really. I'm actually trying, and I think we picked the Norwegian man looking out to the fjords of Norway for a reason, because I think what we wanted to do, and I'll explain why I'm talking in a we perspective right now. What I will be trying to explain to you is that we are on a path right now. Everything is work in progress when it comes to CO2, when it comes to CSR, and I think that's also one of the reasons why we picked that photo, because I will not try to give you a story that everything that we are doing is perfect. I think there are quite some challenges, but we are on the way to improve ourselves, and I'm hoping that I can bring across that message. But before I start with my presentation, I would like to ask you, everybody of you has a mobile phone or a laptop in front of you. So if you all go to that website that I have just presented, so because I would like to get your input first and ask you, so I'll give you 2 minutes to give me your responses about what you think or what your associations are with our company. All right, it's good that you associate HeidelbergCement with cement. That's already a good start, yes? All right. Actually, when I see that somebody put Mannheim on there, the one question that I always get is, HeidelbergCement, where are you actually based? So it seems to be kind of a surprise that HeidelbergCement is actually based in Heidelberg, but yes. All right, Trump's wall, yes, that's one of the topics. Always good to know. Right, it's actually more diverse than I would have thought. I would have expected that everybody is saying something about our CO2 emissions, okay, but all right, it's what's Feuerwerk, right? Okay. All right, but I think that the general picture is quite clear. There are quite a number of topics that are mentioned: emissions, polluting, dirty, big, gray, carbon emissions, environmental risk, greenhouse gases, yes. I guess that's the basic idea that many people have of HeidelbergCement. And well, I would be lying if all of them are wrong, but I would also argue that we are currently in the process of improving. So I will now stop that and move to the presentation again. So now you see two of us here, so I will just, as one remark on that, it was actually the plan that Patrick is going to support me here because he's our CO2 strategy manager, and he is the person who can talk about CO2, but now it's only me. I'm the corporate social responsibility manager of HeidelbergCement. I actually graduated in this university 10 years ago, I think, or something like that. When I graduated, this whole building or this room here, I think, was still under construction. A lot has changed since then, especially also when it comes to these kinds of topics, when it comes to sustainability. Because when I studied economics. Everything related to economics was just hardcore economics, monetary policy, and these kinds of things. The only person who did a lecture on environmental economics was a professor emeritus. So I had to go to Heidelberg to do a couple of lectures. And I think actually that has influenced me a lot more than what I've learned here, to be honest, because this is what was at that time, as I said, very much a hardcore economics faculty. I think that is also one of the changes that we see, that now finally it seems that the university is also waking up, and that a chair for CSR is, in my opinion, a very good and very necessary step for that development. So, as I said, I studied economics, then I worked for an environmental NGO for 5 years, a small one called Global Nature Fund. Then I went corporate. I worked for KPMG for 3 years. I audited sustainability reports. I did some advisory work on sustainability, and then I got my big chance to finally change the world and got the job as corporate social responsibility manager at HeidelbergCement. I've been doing that for the last 2 years. And just also briefly to explain a bit more about HeidelbergCement. So we are one of the largest integrated building materials producers. So that means we have the whole value chain of construction materials, or that specific construction material, concrete. So we have aggregates. That means we have a lot of quarries. We have cement plants, and we have ready-mix concrete plants. So the trucks that you might see on the streets, that's often ours or one of our competitors. Yes, I think we have about 3,000 sites all over the world. We have 48,000 employees, and as you can see, for a topic like CSR, we have to have we have very different cultures when it comes to CSR. We have very different approaches, different values, and what we just heard, I think different values and different things that people believe CSR should be and what a company should be doing. So we try to get all of this under in one framework, which is also one of the challenges. When it comes to sustainability, just briefly on that, to give you the overall framework, again, we have it's already 2 years ago. Yeah, right now it's 2 years ago. We have published the sustainability commitments. Basically, what we are saying is that until 2030, we want to reach certain targets, certain objectives. For example, when it comes to also economic strength, innovation, but also clearly issues that are very important for a company like ours, health and safety. But one of the key topics clearly is the environmental footprint, and especially also with regards to CO2. And then secondly, the second important topic is being a good neighbor. So that's basically the CSR commitment, where we say, okay, we want to support the local communities, and we want to have a transparent communication with them. So now for the fun part. So CO2 and our Vision 2050. As I said, this is actually supposed to be Patrick's part, so I will now make up the new HeidelbergCement strategy from scratch. I will just invent something. Let's see, if you have questions, don't quote me on that, what I'm going to say, but let's see. So let's begin at the beginning. As you all know, probably know these kinds of charts. So we have different agreements, different scientific research. We have different politics that are saying, okay, if we want to achieve or if we want to limit climate change, then we have to reduce our CO2 emissions drastically. So, for example, the 1.5 degree pathway of IPCC, for example. We have the Paris Agreement, which says that we want to have, if we want to limit our emissions to 1.5 degrees, as I said, we have to come to that certain reduction. So in the end, what that means to us, to limit the negative effects of global warming, the global society, and that's very important to say that it's the global society. I mean, industry has to play its role, but it's also society. That also means that we have to change our ways. So we have to become, to stop climate change, we have to become carbon neutral by the mid-century. So that is the basic framework, and we also have to, we have to work with that. So for us as a company, this, however, then relates to three key messages, key challenges. So the first one is that for us, or for industry in general, the CO2 will be one of the central cost drivers for the coming decades, which is something that has not been the case over the last 10, 15 years. And I think the topic of carbon emissions is, well, I can only say that about our company, and that has not been really in the focus in the last 5 years, but since 2-3 years, I think it has gone through the roof, and now everybody's only talking about CO2 anymore. On the other hand, what is especially important for us as a concrete producer, so what we have to do to be in line with these goals that I've just mentioned is to try or to work on the fact that concrete becomes carbon neutral and therefore becomes the most sustainable building material. So basically, as I said, these are the two drivers, climate change, industrial adaptation. And for us, that also relates then, or the third point is then, okay, we have to find a strategic approach, and these kinds of technologies that we need to implement to become carbon neutral ourselves, will only become commercially viable or feasible for us if the surcharges on CO2 emissions pricing, for example, if the prices are high enough. So, and that's what we're expecting, and I think that is also what is in line with different studies that we see, that there are carbon prices that are going to be in 100, 150 euros, 250 euros. So, and we expect that this is going to happen, and only if that is going to happen, then some of the technologies that we need to become carbon neutral will actually work. So our footprint, that was also something on the first word cloud. So the global emissions that we see are about 37 billion tons. The cement industry is one of the big contributors of 2.2 billion, and we have about 0.1 billion, so about 100 million tons of CO2. And what is important for us, and that's I think one of the key challenges that we have. So you see, for example, an electricity provider, they can always say, okay, we from now on stop using fossil fuels, and then they can become carbon neutral. For us, the problem is, okay, we have also kilns. We burn a lot of fossil fuels, yes, and we can use different fuels, and we can reduce our carbon footprint to a certain extent. But the problem for us is mainly that there's a chemical reaction. If you heat limestone, and if you heat limestone, then CO2 is released. So it's an industrial process emission, and if you want to produce concrete, If you want to produce cement, then there will always be these kinds of emissions. That's just chemics and nature. So, and therefore, it's for us, I would say, a bit more challenging to become carbon neutral than, for example, RWE or E.ON. So, the question now is why do we even care about carbon emissions, and why do we even care about the reducing it? Or, like one can say, why can't we just compensate and keep buying certificates, and then in the end keep our production as it is and just throw money at the problem? So this is not going to work. Basic emissions trading logic. I don't know how many have heard about emissions trading schemes in your lectures. Is that actually part of that? Never. You have to go to Heidelberg. There's a good share for environmental economics where you can maybe learn these kinds of things. Anyway, basically, emissions trading 101. Basically, so there's a cap of CO2 emissions, which says, okay, industry is allowed to emit a certain amount of carbon emissions, and that cap is being reduced over time. So that means at some point you are just simply not allowed to emit anymore. You can buy maybe 1 or 2 certificates for millions of euros, but in the end you have to reduce your emissions. And the problem is, or the challenge, or whatever, how you call it, the opportunity maybe also is, so this is the European emissions trading system, which covers most of our emissions that we have as a company, so most of that 100 million that I just mentioned. So we have different pathways that are going to happen in the future. So we have, on the one hand, this is phase 4. So this is emissions trading started in 2007 or something like that, 2005. So over that time, the regime of emissions trading has been tightened in every phase. And so what we now see, for example, is that so the phase 4 cap, so the amount of emissions that we can have as an industry or in the whole emissions trading system is being reduced by 2.2% annually. So in the end, the EU wants to reach a target of 43%. Okay? Then now we have our dear new, what's her title, whatever, Flinten-Uschi. Ursula von der Leyen, so she basically says, okay, she wants to reduce the emissions in Europe by 55%, so again, a bit lower. And in the end, we also have the 2050 climate target for the European European Union, which says we want to reduce emissions by 80 or 95%. So basically, in the end, even though we would like to be producing carbon emissions, and cement associated. We don't want to produce carbon emissions, we want to produce cement, but it's associated with that. But if the cap is that low, it's simply just not possible anymore to produce anymore. And that means because there are no more allowances in the market, it's not possible to buy certificates anymore. That means we have to have reduced our CO2 emissions by 95% at that point, so that we can still keep working. So as you can see, CO2 is the vital question for a company like ours. So how are we then going to tackle that? So again, three different stages. So first, we did what a good engineering company does. We looked at science. So basically, what we did. So we checked what does this 2.5 to a 2 degree 1.5 degree target actually mean for us, and we then came up with a target for us, which is also then the first industry, energy efficient industry who has, we are the first company of an energy intensive industry who has a science-based target. So we are officially in line with reaching that climate target. So basically we got the confirmation that what we are doing should be, if everybody else is doing the same, should help humanity to reach that goal of 1.5 or 2 degrees. Okay, that was the theory. So then the next step, sustainability commitments 2030, which I also mentioned briefly before. That is the first step of putting these kinds of the science into practice. And now, this year, we also made one step further. Our dear CEO, Dr. Bernd Scheifele, the guy who said, okay, I want to build a wall. No, he did not say that, but anyway, that's what people always know about him, and that he's making a lot of money. Anyway, but he said that we should be developing carbon neutral concrete by 2050. So as I said, we are producing cement, but concrete is in the end product. So, and that is the goal that we have until 2050 to be carbon neutral with our end product. And I think that is something that, again, is something that other competitors are not yet committed to. So now let's get a bit more technical and a bit more in the production process. So currently what we have right now is basically that is our value chain. So we have, as I said, we have a quarry, we have limestone quarries. Out of that limestone we produce clinker, which is then grinded and mixed with other things, so we get cement. Cement is then again, water is added, sand is added, then we have concrete, and the concrete is then being used to build a house or infrastructure or whatever. So the problem is, okay, as I said, we always have limestone, we always have the CO2 emissions here, so no way around it anyway. So what we are trying to do now is get rid of the CO2. And we try to close the loop. Yes, circular economy is also one of the buzzwords right now, so we also try to do that. What are we going to do? And so on the one hand, one of the issues that we are focusing on is concrete recycling. So you know we have a lot of infrastructure that we probably don't need anymore. So there's a way, instead of building new or taking new resources, it's also possible to recycle old buildings, and that's one of the issues. The second, cement paste, that's something that I cannot really fully explain, I guess. In the end, is also something related to recycling. That would mean if we have recycling, if we have cement paste, that would mean we have closed that loop. That's already a good step, but we have not solved the CO2 problem. So then the question is, how can we maybe also develop a second loop that is only focusing on CO2? So again, we have different approaches here. We have carbon capture, we have carbon storage, and we have carbon utilization. So in the end, if we are successful in what we are trying to do, we have closed the loop. We will have a CO2 carbon neutral concrete. Our business will be completely carbon neutral. So that's the big goal that we want to reach until 2050. So again, becoming a bit more practical, what does that mean in practice? I think we have 3 steps that we are currently working on to neutralize our CO2 footprint. So the first one is replacement. So that's, for example, as I said, in the factories we are producing cement or we are producing clinker. But for concrete, or for the production of cement, it's not always necessary to have 100% limestone. So it's also possible to throw other things into the mix, and the cement will be as good as that. So for example, we can use fly ash, we can use slag from different industries. That means we are reducing those industrial CO2 emissions that I mentioned before. On the other hand, we can also work on the concrete itself. That means, again, we can also replace clinker, we can replace concrete in that mix. So that would mean that overall the carbon emissions of the concrete are being reduced. The second point is recycling. So what I mentioned before, so for if we have infrastructure that is not needed anymore, if we have built, for example, coal plants, coal-powered plants, well, that's a big building, and we can probably use that for our purposes. And the last point is recarbonation. So basically the idea is, if during the lifetime of concrete, the CO2 which was put into the into the concrete when it was first built is slowly released. So there's a certain potential about recarbonating concrete. So again, putting the CO2 into the concrete. Again, that's a bit of a scientific thing, and I'm not so familiar with that science, so I will rather simply say, okay, there's an option to put CO2 back into the concrete. But what do we need to do? And again, I'm coming back to the first point that I made, or one of the first points that I made. So this is clearly not something that we can do as an industry on our own. There are certain requirements that have to be met to really fulfill our vision. So again, what we need to have, for example, is that we have to have quality standards for demolished concrete, so that we can easily and efficiently use the old buildings in our new concrete. We need to work on standards. So when it comes to, for example, again, recycled concrete, we need to also be working on carbon-free electricity, logistics, all that discussion that we're having on e-mobility and all these kinds of things. Everything has to fall into place so that we can then at some point reach the carbon-neutral concrete. So much for the CO2 vision. So that was the unfamiliar part. I will now move towards a part that I'm a bit more familiar with. So just 1 second. Again, so now maybe that as a short explanation. So CSR in many companies is defined as, or is more or less used and as the same word as a synonym with sustainability. For us, the CSR part is really just the social part. So that means, as I said, the community work, donations, charity, all these kinds of things. Just as a short explanation before I start. So again, just to give you a little bit of the context, and also to maybe come back to the challenges that we face as a company and the challenges that we have in industry. So on the one hand, clearly we have a certain external framework that we have to work with. So we have increasing requirements for us as a company, from investors. So we are being asked, okay, are you actually a good company? Society is being more demanding when it comes to, for example, if you want to have an extension of a quarry, if you want to use alternative fuels in your cement plant. So you have to be very transparent when it comes to society, because they are, they want to know what's happening. Then we are perceived as a controversial industry. I think that was also clear when I looked at your answers to the first poll. But at the same time, we also see that sustainability can be a competitive advantage. So for example, I mentioned, as you saw on the map, that we have a fairly strong footprint in Africa, in Indonesia, in Southeast Asia, and China, and all these different developing countries. Clearly, we are there competing with companies who don't have these sustainability standards, and then it can be either a negative for us because they can produce at a cheaper price, but it can also be an advantage for us, because we can then say, okay, our cement is being produced with certain standards, etc. So if the government of a country, for example, gets credits, gets a loan, for example, from the World Bank, which is tied to certain standards, again, then clearly we also see sustainability as a competitive advantage. And lastly, sustainability and CSR can also be factors in HR. That's probably something more for you again, because that's always the big myth that is being thrown around, that the young people, young generation is looking for work with a purpose and is not going to work for companies that are not being sustainable. And I really hope that this is true, because then that would be a good lever to change the behavior of some of the companies. Well, that's the external point of view. When it comes to internal, as I said before, we have 3,000 sites all over the world, ranging from, we have sites with maybe 2 or 3 people working there. We have big cement plants, the biggest one in Indonesia, I would say, I don't know, 5,000 people working there, for example. So it's a wide range of, it's a very wide range of what people can do, what we as a company can do, what can be done at the sites. So that also means that we have to be very, well, the resources in countries is different. If you just have one small factory, well, then you don't have time and resources to waste on CSR. And also our company is very cost aware, so that adds to the struggle when it comes to sustainability topics. Social license to operate, on the other hand, is one of the key issues that we focus on. So again, having good relationship with the communities, making sure that nobody blocks our operations, and clearly compliance is one of the key issues, also from an internal point of view. All right. So I mentioned that before, sustainability commitment of being a good neighbor. So as I said, we have two columns basically. We have on the one hand, we are saying, okay, we want to support the social and economic development of our neighboring communities. So we do that through giving donations, we do that through strategic projects, we do that through corporate volunteering. I'll give a couple of examples on the last slide. And on the other hand, we also aim to ensure a transparent communication to all our stakeholders. So again, that means, for example, that we want to have an efficient, open, transparent communication structure, that every site that we have has to have a community engagement plan and has to be very well, transparent. And I think that is also one of the big changes for a company like ours, which has for a long time just simply said, okay, we are producing and we are not talking to anyone. And so we are trying again to make the company change. So it's also, it's cultural change that has to be fostered in a way as well. How are we managing all these kinds of things? So we have a corporate citizenship policy, and we have defined 3 focus areas here. For example, so we have building, we have environment, we have education, and as I said, we do the support through financial, in-kind donations and time donations. And this corporate citizenship policy is then being translated into the countries are then being asked to adapt and translate these citizenship policy into local policies, basically. So much for the introduction. So I have just 2 more slides left, I think. But this is the key thing here when it comes. So I talked a lot about the strategy when it comes to CO2. This is what we want to achieve when it comes to CSR. So right now, I'm again, what I said before, this is part of being on a journey right now. So what we have right now, CSR is seen as a charity. It often has absolutely no link with the core business. So we are giving money to football clubs, we are giving money to carnival clubs, we are supporting, I don't know, music festivals, we are supporting race cars and all these kinds of things, and I'm asking myself, why are we doing this? What's the absolute value for that? That's absolutely nonsense, especially when you look at a company like ours, which is so cost aware. Why are we wasting our money on these kinds of things? So we are trying to change that. So therefore also the value that we create through CSR for us as a company is mostly the reputational benefits. We are not thinking about strategic benefits. And we have to really work on internal structures and processes, and I clearly think that there's a lot of potential when it comes to efficiency gains, when it comes to the management of these kinds of topics. So that again means we have to change the management structure, we have to have a global CSR governance, we have to have clearly defined and efficient structures and responsibilities. Just again we have, as I said, we have like 60 countries that we are active in. In maybe 4 countries we have a person who is dedicated for CSR. So 4 might actually be a overestimation, so I'm pretty sure of 3. One is Indonesia, one is India. Both of them have legal obligations when it comes to CSR, so they have to spend a certain amount of money on CSR. And the third one is Togo, and Togo is a special case because when we built the plant in Togo in 2012, I think, we signed a contract or an agreement with the local government, which basically said we have to spend a certain amount of money on CSR. So 3 out of 3 is basically where we have no choice but to spend a lot of money on CSR, and therefore we have a person dedicated for CSR. In the other 57 countries, that's not the case. So that's what I mean with, well, management structure. And we have to be more digitalized. So again, I mean, I'm not sure how other companies are handling that, but probably Excel is not the best option for reporting processes. And we have to work more closely with, for example, HR, other departments to really use the potential of CSR. And the last point, the strategy. So what I'm envisioning, again, this is me having visions right now. What I want to have is basically 3 thematic areas of our corporate citizenship engagement, but not broad. I want to really say, okay, we focus on this and we focus on that. We align that also maybe with the Sustainable Development Goals, and then every country is being asked to contribute to that. So what I mean is, for example, if we say we want to have SDG 11, sustainable cities, as our focus area, and then every one of our focuses can then be, for example, affordable housing or adequate housing. That means that in one country we actually build houses, in another country we renovate houses, in a third country we do something different, but all tied to that theme of housing. And right now, as I said, we have building, construction, infrastructure, so right now everything goes, and I think we have to limit that and to have to be a bit more focused when it comes to these approaches. Well, integrated national CSR strategy, so that's the next challenge. So right now we have the corporate citizenship policy, and the countries are then simply still allowed to do whatever they want to do. So we also have to work with them to develop more clearer CSR strategies, and we have to get a balance between charitable and strategic or even social business projects. So we will never get rid of charity, which also makes sense because we want to be an actor in the communities, which also means that, for example, we are a citizen in the literal sense. So that also means we have to be visible in the communities, and we also have to contribute to the communities. So that means we will never get rid of that social part, the charitable part, but I think there's also potential for wider benefits. And we have to work on volunteering, which is also something that we have not so much done in the past. And last but not least, full understanding of benefits and impacts. So impact measurement is, I would say, one of the key topic areas in CSR right now still. I mean, this has been going on for like, I don't know, 10 years maybe. But still, I think and that's not just us as HeidelbergCement, I think there's still a lot to do. So that was all the theory. Now let's look at some actual projects that we are working with. So as I said, social license to operate is the underlying thing. We have to focus on that. We have to ensure that we have that license to operate. But as I said, there's also the option that we can work on creating actual benefits that go beyond charity, that go beyond just the reputational benefits for us. So what we are doing, for example, we right now are currently working on a project in Benin where we are working on developing an energy efficient cook stove with one of there's nobody from Enactus here, right? No? Right. It's a pity, but so we are working with Enactus here out of Mannheim to develop that project on an energy efficient cook stove. So on the one hand, what we see here, okay, we have that social benefit. We will reduce deforestation, we will reduce health issues of the local population, but at the same time we are creating a new market for our product. It will not change the P&L a lot, but I mean there's a certain contribution to that, and I think that again makes it easier for us to sell the topic of CSR. Jumping one country to the west, so that's one of the projects that we have currently in Togo. So we already have established a Center for Entrepreneurship there, and what we are doing right now in collaboration with GIZ is to develop a curricula for masons and carpenters. And again, if you come to these countries, you see that the construction industry, the quality is very poor. So what we are doing, on the one hand, we are training them, we are helping them to improve their quality, reduce the costs of housing, overall increase the quality of housing in Togo. But on the other hand, again, what we are doing is create also a certain customer loyalty. And we are also creating talent because, I mean, if we are working on basic education, we also have a need for people who have certain skills in our factories. So if we are developing their talent pool, clearly that will also at some point probably also benefit us. And last but not least, we have employee motivation. For example, I mean, the benefits of corporate volunteering, I would say, are fairly well known. And if we are focusing on these kinds of issues, when it comes to, even if it's just one day out cleaning the roadside, for example, that is also something that where I see we have that benefit for society. We are doing something for society, reducing waste or whatever. But on the other hand, we are also tying our employees a bit closer to us. So that was my presentation.